Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, COVID's toll. Hospitals struggle to handle the influx of COVID patients following the rapid spread of the Omicron variant. Then, high stakes. We speak with a progressive Democrat about whether his party can salvage the president's derailed legislative agenda. And the vaccine gap. The racial divide on COVID vaccinations remains stubbornly wide, with many Black Americans still skeptical of the shots.
The main problem is that people are scared. That's real. How do we get fear out of people?
All that and more on tonight's PBS NewsHour.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us.
Consumer Cellular, Johnson & Johnson, financial services firm Raymond James.
Supporting social entrepreneurs and their solutions to the world's most pressing problems. SkollFoundation.org.
The Lemelson Foundation, committed to improving lives through invention in the U.S. and developing countries. On the web at lemelson.org. Supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized the first pill today for an at-home COVID treatment to prevent hospitalizations. High-risk patients who are 12 or older and weigh at least 88 pounds will be eligible for the medication from Pfizer if prescribed by a doctor. The company says it cut the risk of hospitalization by almost 90% if it's taken within a few days of initial symptoms. White House officials said today the initial supply of the pill, known as Paxlovid, will be limited.
We will have 265,000 treatment courses of Pfizer available in January, with monthly totals of pills ramping up across the year and all 10 million treatment courses delivered by late summer. Just as we've done with vaccines and monoclonal antibody treatments, we will ensure equity is at the center of antiviral distribution.
We'll have more on the pandemic after the news summary. In the day's other news, the Biden administration extended its student loan repayment moratorium until May 1st. The pause has allowed tens of millions of Americans to put off their debt payments during the pandemic and was set to expire at the end of January. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki explained what factored into the decision.
Millions of people across the country are still struggling with the ongoing threat of the pandemic. Many of them are student loan borrowers. This is something the president's thought a lot about over the last several days in coordination and, of course, conjunction and discussions with the vice president, and it led to the decision to extend till May.
And we'll have more on this later in the program. The U.S. Secret Service says nearly $100 billion has been stolen from pandemic relief funds that were intended to help struggling businesses and unemployed workers. The agency is investigating more than 900 cases of possible pandemic fraud. The lost sum is less than 3% of the total funds across pandemic benefit programs. As the pandemic rages on, a record number of Americans are signing up for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act's marketplaces. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reports 13.6 million Americans signed up for coverage between November 1st and December 15th alone. Enrollment remains open until January 15th. Overseas, new COVID infections in South Africa are falling, a sign that the country's Omicron-driven surge might be past its peak. Last week, the country reached a high of nearly 27,000 new infections, but by yesterday, that had fallen to around 15,000. Medical experts said that the drop could be due to how quickly the highly contagious Omicron variant spread early on.
We had a lot of infections, so people really start creating immunity in the community, and so there are not that many susceptible individuals that will be infected.
More than 44% of South Africa's adult population is fully vaccinated. Libya's presidential election scheduled for Friday is now being postponed. That comes amid ongoing disputes and the Election Commission's failure to put forth a final list of candidates. It is a major setback to ending the violence and the division that has plagued the North African country since 2011, when its dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, was killed in an uprising. In Madagascar, at least 83 people were confirmed dead today after an illegally overcrowded cargo ship sank in the Indian Ocean. The incident happened early Monday morning off the country's northeastern coast. 50 passengers were rescued, but 5 others are still missing. Back in this country, the U.S. House committee investigating the Capitol siege now wants to interview Republican Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, one of former President Trump's staunchest allies. The committee is seeking details on his communications with Mr. Trump on January 6th. He is the second sitting member of Congress to receive an interview request from the panel this week. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened an investigation into Tesla vehicles over a function that lets drivers play video games while the vehicle is moving. The probe covers about 580,000 electric cars and SUVs. The agency says that the feature, called Passenger Play, could distract drivers and increase the risk of crashing. The nation's economy grew 2.3% in the third quarter. The Commerce Department said that is up slightly from last month's 2.1% estimate. It attributed that rise to stronger consumer spending and replenished inventories. And stocks rallied on Wall Street today, boosted by gains in the technology and the retail sectors. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 261 points to close at 35,754. The Nasdaq gained 181 points. The S&P 500 added 47. Still to come on the NewsHour, how an expiring child tax care credit could affect many families' finances. A civil war rages in Ethiopia as the government rejects calls for a ceasefire. A new exhibit chronicles the struggles of displaced people, plus much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
In the 3 days since Senator Joe Manchin threw up a massive roadblock on the $1.75 trillion Build Back Better agenda, Democrats have begun to scramble to salvage the bill, or at least its key priorities. For progressives, the breakdown was what they feared all along. Yamiche Alcindor talks with one House Democrat about the road ahead.
Judy, last month, just 6 House Democrats voted against a bipartisan infrastructure bill because they wanted to vote on the larger social spending plan at the same time. Now they are expressing frustration with Senator Manchin for holding up the bill. New York Congressman Jamal Bowman is one of them, and he joins me now. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman. So the White House put out this statement on Sunday saying that Senator Manchin had made a breach of commitment to the president, to senators, as well as to House members. But then the next day, the House the White House press secretary, she said that Joe Manchin and President Biden are very longtime friends. What do you make of that change in tone, and what do you think led to it as you talk to your fellow lawmakers?
So I'm hoping the change in tone means that we are moving one step closer toward passing the Build Back Better Act in some form. I know Manchin came out on Sunday and saying that he was a no, which prompted the White House's strong response, which I was happy to see because, you know, they had been negotiating in good faith with Manchin for several weeks now. And I think the pivot in tone hopefully indicates that Manchin is ready to move forward in some capacity.
I want to then also ask you, in talking about finding common ground, you said Senator Manchin doesn't care about Black people, Latinos, immigrants, women, the poor. How concerned are you that that makes it harder to find common ground?
You know, it's important for us to have honest conversations about Congress, how it works, and our overall democracy. And a racial analysis is needed as we have those conversations. So Build Back Better disproportionately supports people of color, whereas many of the policies we pass through Congress does not. And it's important to ask the question, does him being a white male have anything to do with how he approaches policies like this and how he approaches governing overall?
And of course, Senator Manchin says that he is representing the sort of needs and concerns of people in West Virginia.
Yeah, sure. That's great. You know, it's just, you know, in terms of poverty rates in West Virginia, in terms of child poverty rates in West Virginia and other social determinants of positive outcomes, West Virginia really struggles in those areas. And I've heard from people from West Virginia who thanked me for many of my comments because they feel afraid or intimidated to even say anything or challenge the senator in any of these areas. So, you know, the senator has to do what he has to do, obviously, for West Virginia, but also for the entire country. And I just think this idea of trickle-down economics and the way our current economic system works just leaves too many people behind. And that's something that's been unacceptable, and that's something I'm always going to push back against.
Now, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, he has been openly pitching Senator Manchin joining the Republican Party. In your mind, is there room in the Democratic Party, this current Democratic Party, for someone like Senator Manchin?
That's a great question. And I would have to say yes, because the party is a big tent. I just think Senator Manchin and others in the party, too, because it's not just him, need to get on board in what's happening in the 21st century economy and our beautiful 21st century multiracial democracy. We have to make sure everyone's involved. We, meaning the Democratic Party in particular, have to make sure that our big tent is fully represented in our democracy and that everyone has a voice. This is not just an old boys network.
Now, both the chairwoman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, as well as the chair of the moderate New Democratic Coalition, they both said, of course, and acknowledged that Joe Manchin, he's going to need to vote for whatever Democrats want to pass. What are you willing to compromise on? Are you willing at all maybe break up this bill and vote on parts of it and maybe have President Biden pass executive orders on other parts?
We've already compromised from $3.5 trillion to $1.75 trillion, from 10 years to 5 years to 6 years. You know, if Manchin has a 1.8 proposal, let's see what that's like. Let's see what ours is like and see where maybe small, tiny compromises, maybe in terms of years, can happen. But in terms of programs, these programs are absolutely needed because we don't even see a light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this pandemic. So we got to double down pretty urgently.
Well, if you're doubling down and Senator Manchin is saying he's not going to support the Build Back Better Act as it is now and wants to cut programs, are you worried that the perfect will be the enemy of the good here and that you might not get anything done trying to get something perfect done?
So remember, we've already compromised, right, from 3.5 to 1.75. But let's zoom out for a second. When we talk about perfect being the enemy of the good, we still need to get voting rights done. We still need to get women's reproductive rights done. We need to get immigration reform done. We need to get George Floyd done. We need common sense gun laws done. And I think it's important for the American people to see that these bills have passed the House. They've passed the House with strong support from the Democratic Party, and they are stalling, sitting, and dying in the Senate. Why is that? What Senate rules are in place, like the filibuster, that stops this legislation from moving forward? And why do we have senators who are more responsive to their donors and special interests than they are to the American people?
Well, we will surely keep following this story and following the legislation as it moves through Congress. Thank you so much, Representative Bowman.
Thank you for having me.
There was some important news today for college graduates and their families, with the Biden administration extending a pause on student loan payments. Payments will not be required before May 1st, and the extension will help around 41 million borrowers. Meanwhile, millions of families who relied on an increase in the child tax credit are about to lose getting that extra money. Stephanie Sy has more about what's at stake.
Good evening, Judy. The Biden administration's extended child tax credit amounted to direct payments to Americans raising children. They were more generous and they included more poor families. Estimates show nearly 10 million children are at risk of slipping deeper into poverty as the credit expires. It won't disappear entirely, but instead of getting monthly payments of up to $300 per child, Americans will have to file a tax return to claim the funds. The government will also reduce the amount from $3,600 to $2,000 per child annually. Joining me now is Michelle Singletary, personal finance columnist for The Washington Post. Michelle, welcome to the program. It's great to see you. I want to first go into the student loan repayment pause that President Biden announced today. It was supposed to end on January 31st. Why this reversal today, and how does it change things?
Well, there was lots of pressure on the president to extend it because people are still suffering. So there was a lot of outcry from consumer advocates, obviously borrowers, and people in Congress who are saying, listen, people still need this break. Even though the administration said the last pause was the absolute last one. But as everyone knows, the pandemic and things are just constantly changing. And so that's why they decided, hey, let's give people at least 3 more months with no payments.
Okay, do you see at this point, Michelle, blanket forgiveness of federal college loans in the offing? Because the president has also been under pressure by progressive Democrats to do that.
I don't. I think that is a long shot. There is so much on this list that the president needs to get through, that giving people forgiving their loans right now is probably not in the top 3. So I know there are lots of people who are just holding on to it. I've talked to them who says, I'm not going to pay any more than I have to because I'm going to get this loan forgiveness. Listen, you need to pay those loans if you can. And while there's a pause, if you haven't had a disruption in your income, I would say pay on that debt because it's not there's no interest. So you're going to put that money directly on the principal. So if you can afford it, just go ahead and make those payments even now.
So do not hold out for student loan forgiveness. All right, let's move to the child tax credit. The last direct payments were sent on December 15th. Michelle, what does that mean in coming months for families caring for children?
So they got half of the advance payments from July until December. They're going to stop now, obviously, and then they can file tax returns next year to get the rest of that money. But what we found was that people really used that money for what they needed for rent, food for their kids. They manage the money on a monthly basis. When you give people some money at a lump sum, during the times that they don't have these payments, they accumulate debt, they don't pay their rent, they fall behind on things. And so it was so key to keep this going. And unfortunately, millions of people are going to suffer. And they were working, they were trying. And listen, they did extend it to people with no income or low income, but these aren't people who were trying to just, suck the government dry. They really are trying. And it's so important to keep this going. But unfortunately, at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But those families can still collect those payments when they file their return. And if you know anybody who didn't get those payments, they still can get them by filing a return in 2022.
But Michelle, as you know, there are millions of American families that don't make enough money to file those tax returns. What are they facing without these monthly checks? I mean, are we going to go back to the beginning of the pandemic when we were seeing long lines with children and families at food banks?
Well, they're still eligible for these payments. So you get, if they, like say they didn't get them for July, they didn't know they were going to file. So, you know, a lot of community groups are trying to let people know that if you had low income or no income, you are still eligible to get those payments. You're just going to have to file a return. Now, if there's not those monthly payments kicking in, you're absolutely right. More people are, unfortunately, you know, there are going to be kids who are going to go to bed with no food. There are families who are going to worry about the roof over their heads. That's real. And the pandemic showed that we have a country of haves and have-nots. And the have-nots were already on the edge. And the pandemic just pushed them over. And now they're still trying to climb up while we are still going through a surge in COVID. And unfortunately, they are going to suffer.
I feel your passion for this, especially as we head into the holiday season here, and those families always face so many more expenses during the holidays. The Build Back Better plan, as you know, Michelle, is stalled largely because Democratic Senator Joe Manchin opposes keeping the child tax credits, the extended credits, in their current form. How do you think that plays out? Do you think some form of this guaranteed income for families will remain intact in the end?
I don't. I wish I mean, it's the holiday and you want to be happy and upbeat and you want things to happen. The senator, one of the key reasons why he doesn't want it is because he wants a work requirement. With the expanded money, it extended to people with no income or low income, where before you had to have a threshold of income. But look, if you can't work at a restaurant because it's closed down, or your factory closed down, or someone in your household is sick from COVID, even if they've gotten the vaccination, you know, what do you do? And so while we are wagging our fingers at why aren't you doing better, this was a way to make sure that people at least have the bare minimum. And oftentimes those people who are taking care of those children are grandparents. I should know. I was raised by my grandmother. And so they, you know, they're on a fixed income taking care of these kids. And it's very important that we continue what happened with these advance payments. Families used the money for what it needed to be used for.
Michelle Singletary, personal finance columnist at The Washington Post, thank you for sharing your perspective on the NewsHour.
Thank you.
New government data also indicates COVID-19 has contributed to the largest decline in life expectancy since World War II. A CDC report found life expectancy has dropped overall by nearly 2 years since 2019. 2020's death toll from all causes, including but not limited to COVID, marked a 17% spike from the year before, totaling nearly 3.4 million people. And COVID has become the country's third highest killer, behind only heart disease and cancer. This comes as hospitals are reporting overwhelmed ICUs and staff pressed to their limits. For a closer look, we turn to Dr. Adnan Munkara, Executive Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer at the Henry Ford Health System based in Detroit. And Dr. Craig Spencer. He's an emergency medicine physician and Director of Global Health in Emergency Medicine at Columbia University Medical Center in New York. And we thank both of you for joining us. Dr. Munkara, to you first. Henry Ford Health Center in Detroit. How is your hospital doing right now compared to earlier in the pandemic?
Judy, in the past few weeks, we have seen a significant climb in the number of cases that we've had. Unfortunately, in Detroit, we are living now the fourth surge, and we started seeing the numbers climbing up in late July, early August. That climb was initially slow, but in the past few weeks, we got to numbers that exceeded what we have seen in the spring of 2021. So our emergency department, our hospitals, including our intensive care units, have been functioning beyond capacity. We have patients waiting in the emergency department for hours to be able to get a bed in the ICU or to be transferred out of the emergency department. So we've been suffering significantly in our communities.
How are you dealing with this, as you say, stretched beyond capacity? Are people simply waiting, or are you having to send patients elsewhere?
Unfortunately, there is no other place to send them because hospitals across our region and across our state are full. And as I connect with our colleagues, our leaders across the region, there is no place to send them. So what we are trying to do is maximize our capacity, opening certain areas that were not scheduled to be the areas for inpatient COVID. Today, I was doing rounds at one of our hospitals, and one of the areas that used to be a preoperative area, we had to expand beds in it to admit patients to it and to render care to these patients. We've had to postpone and cancel some surgeries last week in order for us to create capacity for patients in the emergency departments, as well as to create beds in the hospitals.
And I want to ask you about that. What percentage of these patients have Omicron? Do you know? And what proportion of them are unvaccinated?
So first, I'll start with the unvaccinated data, because this is data that we have. We've consistently been running 75 to 80% of our patients who are in the hospital are unvaccinated. And in the intensive care units, it's about 85 to 90% of patients are unvaccinated. With respect to Omicron, we are starting to test right now, both in the state as well as our institution. I don't have these numbers yet, but we know that the Omicron numbers are rising rapidly across the nation and in Michigan.
And I want to turn to you, Dr. Spencer, in New York, because you've been writing about the stress that all this has meant for staff. So what does Omicron look like right now where you are in New York? And what about the stress it's putting on people who work in the healthcare sector?
Well, as everyone knows, in the past really few days and few weeks, we have seen a dramatic uptick in the number of Omicron cases here in New York City. We were already dealing with hospitals and emergency departments that were really overfull, where staff were stretched, where space was already limited. This was true before the pandemic here in New York, that was worsened and exacerbated by the pandemic itself. And then over the past few days, with more and more people getting sick, more people coming to the emergency room, thankfully the overwhelming majority, with coughs and colds and appear to be mild cases, it's still putting a lot of stress on our hospitals and our healthcare workers, many of whom themselves are testing positive and finding themselves sick in the past few days, meaning that takes them out of service for 7 to 10 days. Others are, called to come in and cover their shifts, or, maybe we don't have the same number of providers that we normally would to take care of the same number of patients.
So how are you managing, Dr. Spencer, given all this?
Well, healthcare workers across the country are going to continue to show up to work until the day that they're not, right? We've seen a lot of nurses have left the profession. We've seen a lot of doctors, we have a lot of physician assistants, respiratory techs, others who have really weathered this pandemic and didn't expect to be doing this 2 years in, who eventually just kind of gave up or were burned out. And as I wrote in The Atlantic yesterday, there's no new fuse that you can use to fix a broken circuit. It just, we don't have the strength. We're exhausted. We're tired, and there's just not enough of us to provide the care that's currently needed or will be needed, even if a small number of Omicron cases comes into our hospitals and into our ICUs.
And Dr. Munkara, back to you in Detroit. You mentioned that staff are being strained. What are you seeing there?
What we are seeing first, that people are tired and honestly to some extent frustrated, because they feel many of these hospitalizations can be prevented if more people get vaccinated. And this is the most frustrating part for people. And as I'm talking to our staff, and I made rounds today, unfortunately, we are seeing sick patients who are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s needing to be on ventilators, and we are losing some of them. And the majority of these are vaccinated. And there is nothing harder for a care provider, for a healthcare provider, to see somebody lose their life for something that we could have prevented with a vaccine, with a treatment that is easily available to all of us. So we are working with our staff.
And that's a message we've been hearing every day from the White House. Today at the White House COVID briefing, Dr. Spencer, one of the pieces of news we heard, the good news about a pill to treat COVID, although it will take time to get it manufactured in sufficient numbers, but not so good news about the monoclonal antibodies that are used to treat people once they are sick. How is that bit of information going to affect your ability to work with people?
It's a great question. And, here in New York City, there is a lot of kind of angst and a lot of people are quite worried. But again, this is not March 2020. At that time, we were inundated. The hospitals really cleared out for everything but COVID patients. We didn't have a lot to offer patients at that time other than our great supportive care, but we didn't have treatments, we didn't have vaccines, other things that we have now. We've had a lot of clinical trials that tell us how to improve the survival dramatically of severe COVID patients. We have vaccines, as Dr. Munkara pointed out, have kept the overwhelming majority of people out of our hospitals, thankfully, even if there's a lot of them. And the monoclonal antibody news is indeed bad news because we know that the monoclonals that may work are already in short supply and haven't really been distributed. But the news today that the FDA is authorizing the Paxlovid, the medication from Pfizer, should be helpful. It's going to be a limited supply at first, but it had a dramatic impact on keeping people out of the hospital. And that's been one of the things that we've been missing to date. Not a treatment in the hospital, not a vaccine, but something for people who get sick to keep them out of our ERs, out of our ICUs. The challenge is going to be scaling it up, making sure people are able to get a diagnosis, get a test, and get those medications from the pharmacy in the first 5 days of that illness where it's been shown to be very effective.
And Dr. Munkara, on that question of the pill and the monoclonal antibody treatment, how much of a difference do you think all this can make? And frankly, when I hear you say staff being frustrated working with people who've not been vaccinated, how hard are you having to work to keep staff at it?
We are really grateful to great staff who have been committed to drive the best care that they can for our patients. But it is after being there for 18 months at the present time, and after doing it time after time after time, I can tell you everybody is fatigued. And we are working with them very closely to thank them for what they are doing. And still, it is so uplifting to see the smiles on their face when we are rounding and we are talking to them and seeing them render care to the patients. I agree that the news about the monoclonal antibody is distressing for us because we've been giving about 700 to 800 doses a week to make sure that we keep our patients and our community out of the hospital so that they don't need the care that they, into being in the intensive care unit or being in a hospital bed and occupying that. We are very hopeful that the pill will kind of provide some relief, and we are really hoping that the monoclonal antibodies that effective become more available to us so that we continue to provide these in the outpatient setting. We need to keep our patients out of the hospital because it's not only impacting our staff, it is also impacting non-COVID patients from getting the care that they need to get to. Patients who have severe cardiac disease, who have advanced cancer, who have a bad stroke. We don't want them to be sitting out there and avoiding coming to the hospital because they are scared.
Well, Dr. Adnan Munkara, Dr. Craig Spencer, it's so clear that you both very much have your hands full, and we appreciate your taking time to talk with us today. We wish you the very best in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
One year after COVID vaccines were first made available, the vaccination rate for Black Americans still lags significantly behind. In this report, co-produced with the NewsHour, Kaiser Health News correspondent Sarah Varney looks at the hard process of changing minds.
Each morning after Anthony Williams opens his barbershop in Hartford, Connecticut, he gladly offers a steady stream of opinion with his haircuts.
You know, they say having kids is like having a best friend with no money.
But these days, much of the talk centers on COVID vaccines.
Jordan, you had to get vaccinated for school, right?
For nearly a year, Williams shared his deep skepticism about the vaccine with his customers, pointing to unfounded anti-vaccine YouTube videos.
In the beginning, I was just a little weary. I mean, a lot of people say, long-term effects, and it was just everything was happening so fast. The news drove fear. I don't generally take headache medicine, pain medicine myself. So it was just a it was the unknown for me. The same position that we were in.
Right. Williams and his wife Anika run a local juice bar and have 5 children. In August, their 16-year-old daughter Leilani asked to get vaccinated so she could go back to school without worrying.
I didn't know they could text on this.
Although Anika was also wary of the vaccine, she decided to get vaccinated alongside her daughter.
Do you know the fruits? What fruit?
But Anthony still didn't budge.
And I feel like we respect each other's bodies and what we feel like we put in and out. And I think just having those conversations up front and forward in the beginning, and his opinions and his reasons why he didn't was very clear, and mine was too.
Then, in November, Anthony's mother was diagnosed with lung cancer and rushed into surgery. The hospital wouldn't let him visit because he was unvaccinated.
Oh my God!
That was the push he needed.
You see Daddy get his vaccine? That was my first time, like, COVID smacked me in the face, like, haha, you can't go see your mom. And I had to go do it. And that wasn't even a decision. All the combative arguing we did, and it was just quick. That happened on Friday. I was vaccinated Sunday.
After months of mass vaccination sites and drive-through clinics, this is the effort now, block by block.
There is no greater disparity when you compare the urban population of Hartford.
T.J. Clark, who works in public health in Hartford, says that is especially true in Black communities, where vaccination rates often trail those of whites.
How many miles divide West Hartford and North Hartford?
Only a few miles.
Clark is also majority leader of the city council. He says Hartford has a long history of racial and economic divisions. Here in Northeast Hartford, life expectancy is 15 years lower than in West Hartford Center, where upscale homes and prosperous shops signal the majority white neighborhood. In Connecticut, 75% of whites have received at least 1 dose, but only 59% of blacks.
In this neighborhood, what would you expect the vaccination rate to be?
80 to 85, maybe 90% of its population in West Hartford will be deemed as fully vaccinated.
Wow. And what accounts for that? Is it just access? People here in West Hartford have better access to getting the vaccine?
Access is tremendously better. It's 1,000 times better. And then because you do have people who are paying attention, they're hooked up to their devices, they seem to have some type of insight from some of the industry professionals as well.
Although nationwide the racial divide has narrowed in recent months, large gaps persist between blacks and whites. In Florida, North and South Dakota, Vermont, Michigan, and in Connecticut.
It's been a year since COVID vaccines have been available, but here in Connecticut, the vaccination gap between blacks and whites is one of the largest in the nation. Hartford's community leaders have been trying to perfect their message for months, but they're still trying to crack the code.
Still has nothing conclusive on him.
Keith Grant is the Senior System Director for Infection Prevention at Hartford Healthcare. He's tried one approach after another. For one effort, he surveyed about 1,200 patients, and many responded that lack of transportation was the reason they didn't get vaccinated. So Hartford Healthcare spent $1.4 million to set up a rideshare program. The results were disappointing.
So they told you we need transportation, you delivered transportation, and less than 20% took
Less than 20% took us off on it.
Why do you think that is?
And that's one of our biggest challenges. Some individuals, the timing wasn't right. For some individuals, they still didn't really believe in the vaccine or believe in the actual process itself.
Grant says there have been wins, but understanding the losses is critical.
Well, because, losing, unlike many things in business and healthcare, losing is not just the metrics now. It's like people. It's actual people.
Individual people who haven't gotten vaccinated
100%.
and are at risk.
Now, Grant is moving well beyond the hospital campus, working closely with those who can influence the black community.
A lot is on my mind about this vaccination.
That includes pastors Michael Bailey and Leroy Bailey III at the First Cathedral, one of the largest black churches in the area, and Brandon McGee, a Democratic state representative. The church is already hosting vaccine clinics like this one. But these men are trying to untangle the many reasons black residents aren't getting vaccinated.
Folks are struggling. And some of the immediate needs like food, shelter, access to just health care in general, That's at top of mind. So when you begin talking about, you want me to go get tested, you want me to figure out this vaccine, and I'm reading on the news what's happening, I'm confused. I just need some money for my food.
On the table. Yeah, and I don't got time to get sick because I got to deal with all these other issues. I don't got time. I think one of the main problems is that people are scared. That's real. How do we get fear out of people? And I think that's an issue, especially in our community.
We didn't hear from you.
Was it the Tuskegee
experiment?
McGee says his constituents tell him all the time that they distrust the government because of cases like the Tuskegee syphilis study, in which government researchers deliberately withheld treatment for poor black men. But he says this is a different moment.
We were tested on. So I hear you. I hear you. But now we have an opportunity as a community, as leaders, to turn that page and say, look, if you want to be healthy, you want to live, you might want to be vaccinated.
Of course, the black community is not monolithic, and many black Americans have been vaccinated.
I think the first time we had the clinic, it was about 70 people that came out.
Jamaican immigrant Donna Trowers Morrison asked her pastor at North United Methodist Church to urge parishioners to attend a vaccine clinic she organized. It was a huge success. Hartford has a thriving Caribbean immigrant population that Trowers Morrison says has a different history.
As a Caribbean person, we accept it. We accept the system more just because we weren't a part of the history of what happened in the past.
We don't know what's going to come out your mouth.
But tough work remains. At Anthony Williams' barbershop, he's been taking a lot of flack for changing his mind about the vaccine.
Look, now I'm a sellout. This is crazy.
You are a sellout.
I am not a sellout, bro. I had to.
This man, Taj Gibson, says there's nothing Williams can say or do to convince him until the vaccine has been out longer.
What would it be for you, though, if you had to put a number on it? Would it be after a year, after 2 years? Do you want to see 10 years?
3 to 5 years. 3 to 5 years.
And so what do you make of the millions and millions and millions of people that have gotten the vaccine and have been okay?
Everybody's different. Everybody's individual body is different.
16 years, I've been working so much.
It's been quite a journey for Williams. He's had a change of heart, not only about the vaccine's safety, but also what he now sees as his responsibility to convince others. He's working on them, one at a time. For the PBS NewsHour and Kaiser Health News, I'm Sarah Varney in Hartford, Connecticut.
In Ethiopia, a civil war that's been raging for more than a year seems to be entering a new phase. Rebel forces from the Tigray region are relinquishing areas seized from federal control. But the government of President Abiy Ahmed says it is skeptical of the rebels' ultimate goals. Tonight, the U.S. State Department is calling on all parties to cease hostilities. As Ali Rogan reports, the conflict may be evolving, but peace remains elusive.
In this Tigray marketplace, the scars of Ethiopia's air war are everywhere. A Tigrayan channel shows survivors carrying away victims. The injured receive treatment. Officials show what they say is shrapnel.
Drones attacked the market and killed more than 38 people, and more than 80 people were injured.
Drones like this Turkish model are new to the Ethiopian conflict. They've given the upper hand to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and his allies over fighters loyal to the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. Johnny Carson is a former Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of African Affairs. He's now an advisor to the United States Institute of Peace, a think tank founded by Congress.
Up until 3 weeks ago, the TPLF was making a concerted advance moving southward towards the capital of Addis Ababa. But in the last 3 weeks, the introduction of drones supplied largely by the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Iran, have given the Ethiopian military an advantage on the battlefield.
The crisis began more than a year ago when Tigrayan forces who used to run the country attacked a federal outpost. Federal forces and their allies from neighboring Eritrea and the Amhara region waged a scorched earth campaign and occupied parts of Tigray. But in late June, Tigrayan forces pushed federal Ethiopian soldiers out and kept going from Tigray into neighboring Amhara and Afar and on toward the capital, Addis Ababa. But Abiy's forces pushed back. Bolstered by drones, they recaptured towns under Tigrayan control. These images purportedly show Ethiopian military trucks in Amhara in early December, about a month after the Tigray incursion.
We said, Ethiopia won't be defeated because we relied on you. Most of the areas in Amhara, as well as all of Afar, have been freed. We will continue the same with the remaining places.
Tigrayan forces now say they are in retreat. In a letter to the United Nations Sunday, TPLF leader Debretsion Gebremichael said he ordered an immediate withdrawal of troops outside Tigray's borders. He said he hoped it would be a decisive opening for peace. But so far, the Ethiopian government has rejected the overture.
The current, noise with regards to whether it's a strategic retreat or not will inevitably reveal itself.
Carson says he believes Abiy is more focused on a decisive military victory against the Tigrayans.
He regards the Tigrayans as terrorists, as individuals who have undermined the stability of the state. I think he probably, if he has the chance, he will seek to destroy them.
Meanwhile, civilians continue to suffer the most. A November United Nations report detailed atrocities committed by all sides, including executions, violence against women, and the destruction of property. And the international community accuses the Ethiopian government of a siege against Tigray. The UN says Tigray has received only 12% of needed humanitarian aid since July. Last week, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights tasked a group of human rights experts to spend the next year investigating further.
Our office continues to receive credible reports of severe human rights violations and abuses by all parties.
The Ethiopian government rejects the new probe.
My government will not cooperate with any mechanism that may be imposed on it.
But Carson said now is the time for the international community to put more pressure on the Ethiopian government.
This is a critical moment in this process, and if there is any delay in moving forward, we could see greater violence, greater bloodshed, and a greater humanitarian problem emerge.
Now, with Tigrayan forces retreating and resetting in their home region, there's little to stop Abiy and his forces from following them. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Ali Rogan.
Artists can often use their work to draw attention to global events. Special correspondent Mike Saray has this look at one artist highlighting the refugee crisis. It's part of our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
Graphic portraits of recent asylum seekers on a barge silently floating past New York's Statue of Liberty and on San Francisco Bay, past Angel Island, the Ellis Island of the West. Visual artist Shimon Addy's floating electronic canvas is as much about engaging people in the current refugee crisis as it is about getting them to reflect on it.
The common theme in my work is usually to give voice to undertold, underrepresented histories, marginalized communities, those who have been dispossessed, those who have been persecuted.
From projecting images of displaced shops in what once was Berlin's Jewish quarter before World War II.
In the case of that particular installation, that Hebrew bookstore was located precisely there. I think that was 1930, that photograph that I projected.
To light boxes highlighting the ongoing tensions between Palestinians and Israelis in the occupied West Bank.
The cityscape overall in the distance, or the natural landscape in the distance, is part of the canvas as well.
Visual artist Shimon Addy relies on a variety of media and public art to draw attention to displaced and marginalized cultures.
My hope is to perhaps give the audience an opportunity to have a new experience, to experience a familiar subject matter in a new way.
A former psychotherapist, Addie includes what's called urban archaeology to his process of recovering lost histories of people and bringing them back into view and our consciousness through his multimedia installations.
The reality is that much of my work does seek to articulate a shared common humanity between different groups of people.
Early in his career, he researched the genealogy of Manhattan's Lower East Side, a melting pot for Italian, Jewish, and Chinese immigrants who shared with him their stories and common experience of having to leave their home for somewhere else.
The laser write-out technique, the unseen hand, right? It's happening in real time, almost like as if a ghost is writing. And then once the entire thought or reflection is written out, then it unwrites, like disappearing ink.
You know, when people talk about the medium being the message, the medium of the water, the medium of an LED screen on the water, on a barge, is that the art in itself?
No. When I think media, I also think aesthetics. And I think that the aesthetics are part of the message because I'm not a politician. I'm not an activist per se. I'm an artist.
His video installation of a group of recent Syrian refugees playing roulette captures the uncertainty and risks they faced just weeks earlier while making their perilous crossing to Europe in small boats. As prevalent as the refugee crisis is, do you think people are kind of numb to the images of people in stress and displacement, and you need to take them outside that normal realm of the news coverage?
Definitely, absolutely, 100%. And that's the potential of art, of contemporary art, right? To put forward new representations, new images, a new way of considering a familiar subject matter.
An alliance of San Francisco Bay Area arts and human rights organizations recently featured Shimon Addie's work and others focusing on immigration. An animation of an Iraqi exodus in ancient Mesopotamia by visual artist Zaina Barakat used San Francisco's tallest building for her canvas.
Water is a very amazing medium to work with. Number one, it's always changing. It's fleeting. It's constantly in movement. It's, in terms of social history, it's very often been the media for escape, emigration, immigration, fleeing for one's life, being welcomed into a new homeland.
The former immigration center on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay was everything but a welcoming place for Asians migrating to California after the gold rush. Now a museum, some of them were initially interned in these holding barracks for nearly 2 years until they could complete a complicated sponsorship process.
I respond to places and spaces and architecture and tangible, concrete locations that I can touch and that I can move my own body through. So the sense of place is very important in my work.
My name is Sergey, and I'm originally from Kazakhstan.
My name is Niurka Melendez. I'm here because I fled my country, Venezuela.
The 12 refugees from 7 countries featured in the Night Watch installation had recently been granted asylum in the U.S. The refugees' video portraits were designed to draw more attention than sympathy.
I try to avoid handing over the emotional goods in a simplistic kind of way, which will make the viewer feel either sympathetic or empathetic or pull away or frightened.
Like in a gallery, his floating exhibit in very public spaces was viewed in collective silence, leaving each person to reflect on the images and what they represent.
I'm looking at you. You're looking at me. I'm looking at you. You're looking at me. And each viewer makes their own meaning from that experience.
One of those rare moments when political art and just its stunning aesthetics have come together in a way that is so powerful.
We're living through probably the greatest refugee crisis since World War II. Over 80 million people displaced or refugees. This issue is not going away. Do you think your art will continue to focus on this?
I do. I tend to respond to the issues that I care most deeply about, and I don't think that I'll start caring less about helping those that are most in need.
Photographs of Shimon Addy's refugee installations are on display in San Francisco and New York galleries. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Mike Saray in San Francisco.
And we have some late-breaking news. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear challenges to the Biden administration's vaccine mandates for large employers and healthcare workers. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. For all of us at the PBS NewsHour, thank you. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by...
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Johnson & Johnson. BNSF Railway. Financial services firm Raymond James. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.